The massive space station called Nexus 7 floated in the darkness between 3 solar systems. Ships from across the galaxy came here every few months to trade goods and share information. The station was huge with silver walls and spinning sections that created artificial gravity for the thousands of beings who lived and worked. Inside, Dr. Zara Kelleth walked through the medical bay, checking her equipment for the 100th time that day. She had blue skin that shimmered under the bright lights and 4 large eyes that could see things humans could never imagine. As the chief medical officer for alien species, it was her job to scan every visitor who came to the station. The bioscanners were the most advanced machines in known space and could tell her everything about a person's health just by looking at them. Today was special because a new group of humans was arriving. Humans were still pretty new to the galactic community, and everyone was curious about them. They looked strange compared to other species with their pink and brown skin, tiny eyes, and weird hair that grew on their heads. Most aliens thought humans were kind of weak and soft compared to the warrior races or the highly evolved species that had been traveling space for thousands of years. The first human ship docked at Airlock 7 with a soft thud that echoed through the station. Zara watched on her screen as the airlock cycled and the first human stepped out. They wore dark blue uniforms with patches and symbols she was still learning to read. The humans walked with confidence even though they were surrounded by aliens who could easily hurt them. The first human to enter her scanning room was a woman with short brown hair and kind eyes. The scanner hummed softly as it examined her from head to toe. Green lights flashed on Zara's screen showing normal readings for human biology. Heart rate steady, bone density within expected ranges, no signs of serious injury or disease. The woman smiled and thanked Zara before moving on to the next checkpoint. More humans followed and each scan went smoothly. Zara began to relax as she got used to human biology. They were actually pretty normal despite their strange appearance. Some had small scars from accidents or minor injuries, but nothing unusual for any species that worked in space. Then, Jake Morrison stepped into the scanning chamber. Was tall for a human with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they had seen years of hard work. His brown hair was cut short in a military style, and his green eyes were calm but alert. What caught Zara's attention immediately were the scars. They covered his arms, neck, and face in a pattern that told stories of violence and survival. Some were thin white lines while others were thick and twisted like rope under his skin. Morrison stood still in the center of the scanning chamber as the machine began its work. The soft humming sound started just like it had with the other humans. Zara expected to see the same green lights and normal readings appear on her screen. Instead, her world exploded into chaos. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the medical bay. Alarms screamed so loudly that beings in nearby sections could hear them. Her 4 eyes went wide as error messages filled every screen in the room. The bioscanner was having some kind of breakdown. Warning: biological anomaly detected. Subject has sustained fatal trauma multiple times. Calculating survival probability. The computer's voice was calm even as more alarms joined the chorus of noise. Zara's hands flew over her controls, trying to understand what was happening. The scanner was the most reliable piece of equipment on the station. It had never malfunctioned in the 3 years she had been working here. She ran a quick diagnostic, but everything showed normal operation. Error. Previous fatal injuries detected. Burns covering 60% of body surface area. Multiple projectile wounds to vital organs. Severe blunt force trauma to head and torso. Compound fractures to major bone structures. Evidence of poisoning by 7 different toxins. The computer continued listing injuries that would have killed any being she had ever scanned. Morrison looked around at the flashing lights and loud alarms with mild confusion. He did not seem worried or scared. If anything, he looked a little embarrassed by all the attention. "Is there a problem here, Doc?" he asked in a voice that was surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he had been through a war. Zara stared at him, and then back at her screens. According to the bioscanner, this human should have died many times over. The machine was reading cellular damage and scar tissue that indicated he had survived injuries that would instantly kill most species in the galaxy, burns that should have cooked his organs, wounds that should have made him bleed to death in minutes, and head trauma that should have destroyed his brain. Yet here he stood looking perfectly healthy and asking if there was a problem. "Please remain still," Zara managed to say as she ran the scan again. She was sure there had to be some mistake. Maybe the scanner was picking up readings from multiple humans somehow, or there was interference from the ship's engines. The second scan produced exactly the same results. If anything, the computer seemed even more alarmed. New messages appeared on her screen that she had never seen before. Subject classification: impossible to kill. Recommend immediate quarantine and study. This being should not be alive according to all known biological parameters. Morrison shifted his weight from one foot to the other, but remained patient as Zara ran a third scan. Other humans were starting to gather outside the medical bay, wondering what all the noise was about. Station security was probably on their way to investigate the alarms. The third scan confirmed what Zara was struggling to accept. This human had somehow survived enough trauma to kill a small army. The scars on his skin were just the visible evidence of damage that went much deeper. According to the scanner, his bones had been broken and healed multiple times. His organs showed signs of serious injury and repair, and his nervous system had been damaged and somehow reconstructed itself. Morrison cleared his throat politely. "Doc, I hate to rush you, but my team is waiting to get through processing. Is everything okay with your machine?" Zara looked at him with all four of her eyes, trying to understand how he could be so calm. In her homeworld's language, she whispered a prayer to the old gods because she was looking at something that should not exist. "The machine is working perfectly," she said in a voice that shook slightly. "That appears to be the problem." News traveled fast on Nexus 7, and within 2 hours every scientist on the station had heard about the impossible. Human. Dr. Zara Kelleth found herself sitting in the main conference room surrounded by the most brilliant minds from dozens of different species. The room buzzed with excited chatter in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal and electronic beeps. Station Commander Vex Quantum stood at the head of the long table. His crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls as he moved. He was a Zephyrian mathematician and one of the smartest beings Zara had ever met. His mind worked like a computer, and he could solve problems that stumped entire research teams. "Dr. Kelleth," Commander Quantum said in his voice that sounded like wind chimes, "please explain to the Council exactly what your scanner detected." Zara activated the holographic display in the center of the table. A three-dimensional image of Jake Morrison appeared, showing every scar and injury the scanner had found. Gasps and surprised sounds came from around the room as the various aliens saw the extent of damage the human had survived. "According to our bioscanner, Lieutenant Commander Morrison has survived 17 separate incidents that should have resulted in death," Zara began. "The probability of surviving even one of these injuries is less than 3% for most known species." Dr. Nexus Vorthan raised one of his 6 arms. He was an expert in evolutionary biology and had studied more species than anyone else on the station. Could this be some form of genetic mutation unique to this individual human? Before Zara could answer, the conference room doors opened and 2 more humans entered. Captain Rex Thorne walked in first, followed by Morrison himself. Thorne was older, with gray hair and scars of his own visible on his hands and neck. Morrison looked calm despite being the center of so much attention. "Gentlemen," Commander Quantum addressed the humans, "thank you for joining us. We have some questions about Lieutenant Commander Morrison's medical history." Captain Thorne took a seat at the table while Morrison remained standing. "We're happy to help, but I'm not sure what all the excitement is about. Jake's been through some tough missions, but so have most of our military personnel." Dr. Kelleth pulled up Morrison's scan results again. "Captain Thorne, would you be willing to submit to a bioscan yourself, for comparison purposes?" Thorne shrugged and agreed. 20 minutes later they had his results and the room fell silent. Thorne's scan showed he had survived injuries that would have killed most beings 4 times over. Compared to other species, he was remarkably durable, but next to Morrison, he looked almost fragile. "This is fascinating," whispered Dr. Luna Brightscale, a reptilian researcher from the Outer Rim. "Captain Thorne's results would be considered extraordinary for any species we have on record. Yet compared to Morrison, he appears to have lived a sheltered life." Morrison finally spoke up. "Look, I appreciate all the scientific interest, but I don't understand what the big deal is. Yes, I've been hurt before. Yes, I've survived some bad situations. That's just part of being a soldier." Commander Quantum's crystalline form shifted colors as he processed this information. "Lieutenant Commander, you must understand that what you consider normal survival is mathematically impossible for virtually every other species in the galaxy. The trauma your body has endured and recovered from defies our understanding of biological limits. Dr. Kelleth had been studying human medical records since the morning, and what she found made her question everything she thought she knew about biology. I have been reviewing all available human medical data from your species database. The pattern is consistent across your entire population. Humans routinely survive injuries that would be instantly fatal to other species. She brought up comparison charts showing injury survival rates across different species. Humans were so far above the galactic average that their data looked like a mistake. Your species has survival rates that are 10 to 50 times higher than the next most durable known beings. A small alien with purple skin and large black eyes raised her hand. Dr. Kira Moonshine was a medical researcher who specialized in cellular regeneration. Have you considered that human biology might operate on completely different principles than other species? Morrison looked confused. What do you mean, different principles? We get hurt, we heal, we move on. Sometimes the healing takes longer and leaves scars, but that's just how it works. Dr. Moonshine stood up and activated another holographic display. Most species have linear healing processes. Damage occurs, the body attempts repairs and either succeeds or fails. But human cellular data suggests something much more complex. The hologram showed a human cell being damaged and then repairing itself. But instead of simply returning to its original state, the cell appeared to become stronger and more resistant to future damage. Your bodies don't just heal, Dr. Moonshine explained. They adapt and improve based on the trauma they experience. Each injury teaches your biological systems how to better survive the next one. Captain Thorne leaned forward in his chair. Are you saying we get tougher every time we get hurt? That's exactly what the data suggests, Commander Quantum confirmed. Lieutenant Commander Morrison isn't just lucky to have survived his injuries. His body has been systematically trained by each traumatic event to become more resilient. Morrison scratched his head and looked at the various scars on his arms. I never really thought about it that way. I just figured some people are tougher than others. Dr. Kelleth pulled up Morrison's brain scans. Even your neural pathways show adaptation to trauma. Your pain tolerance, reaction time, and stress responses have all been enhanced by your experiences. You're not just physically tougher, you're mentally conditioned to function under extreme conditions. The room fell quiet as the implications sank in. They weren't just looking at one unusually durable human. They were seeing evidence that the entire human species had evolved biological systems that made them nearly impossible to permanently defeat. How many humans serve in your military? Dr. Vorthan asked quietly. Captain Thorne smiled grimly. About 200 million active personnel across all branches and colonies. Commander Quantum's crystalline form flickered as he processed this number. 200 million beings with survival capabilities that exceed our most optimistic projections for biological durability. Morrison looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him with mixtures of amazement and concern. Is this a problem for you folks? Dr. Kelleth realized that everything the galactic community thought they knew about humans was wrong. They had assumed humans were a weak species that needed protection and guidance. Instead, they might be looking at the most militarily formidable beings in known space. No, Lieutenant Commander, she said slowly. It's not a problem. It's a complete revolution in how we understand survival, adaptation, and the possibilities of biological evolution. Dr. Zara Kelleth barely slept for 3 days as she dove deeper into human biology data. Her research team worked around the clock scanning every piece of medical information they could find about humans. What they discovered made her question everything she had learned about life and survival. In her 40 years as a xenobiologist, the TU laboratory was filled with holographic displays showing human cellular structures, bone density charts, and neural pathway maps. Each piece of data told the same impossible story. Humans had biological systems that other species could only dream of having. Their bodies were like living machines that got better every time they were damaged. Dr. Kelleth called up the comparison data on her main screen. She had medical records from 347 different species, spanning millions of years of galactic civilization. Every single one followed the same basic pattern of injury and recovery. Damage occurred, the body tried to fix itself and either succeeded in returning to the original state or failed and died. Humans were completely different. When a human bone broke, it healed back stronger than before. When human skin was cut, it grew back with better defenses against future cuts. When human muscles were torn, They rebuilt themselves with more fibers and greater strength. It was as if their entire species had been designed by someone who understood that survival meant constant improvement. It's not just the physical adaptation, Dr. Kelleth explained to her assistant, a young Vorthon named Pip, who had been helping with the research. Look at these brain scans from human soldiers compared to civilians. The brain scans showed clear differences between humans who had experienced combat and those who had lived peaceful lives. The soldiers had enhanced neural pathways for quick decision-making, improved pattern recognition, and increased emotional control under stress. Their brains had literally rewired themselves to be better at surviving dangerous situations. Meanwhile, word about the impossible human had spread beyond the scientific community. In the station's cantina, Jake Morrison found himself surrounded by beings from across the galaxy who wanted to meet the human who couldn't be killed. Some were curious, others were worried, and a few looked like they were planning something unpleasant. A group of Corvan mercenaries approached Morrison's table where he was eating lunch with Captain Thorne. The Corvans were tall humanoid beings with gray skin and natural armor plating covering their bodies. They were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who hired themselves out to anyone willing to pay for their services. "Human," the largest Corvan said in a voice like grinding stone. "We hear you are impossible to kill. This interests us greatly." Morrison looked up from his meal and smiled politely. "I wouldn't say impossible, just hard to keep down." The Corvan leader, whose name was Grax according to the translator, sat down without being invited. "My people have fought in wars across 50 star systems. We have faced the most dangerous predators and deadliest warriors in known space, yet our own survival rates in combat are only 60%. Captain Thorne set down his fork and watched the Corvans carefully. He recognized the signs of mercenaries looking for either a fight or a job opportunity. "What's your point, Grax?" "Our point is that we want to understand how humans achieve such remarkable durability," another Corvan said. "Perhaps we could learn from each other." Morrison thought about this for a moment. He had been getting similar requests all day from various alien groups. Some wanted to hire him for dangerous missions, others wanted to study him, and a few had made vague threats about testing his limits. He was getting tired of being treated like a circus attraction. "You want to know about human toughness?" Morrison asked, rolling up his sleeve to show a particularly impressive scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. "This one's from when I got caught in a plasma conduit explosion on Europa Station. The blast threw me 30 meters through a reinforced bulkhead." The Corvans leaned in to get a better look at the scar. It was clearly from a severe burn that had gone deep into the muscle and bone. By their standards, such an injury would have required months of recovery and would have left the victim permanently weakened. "The medic said I'd never use my arm again," Morrison continued, flexing his fingers and rotating his wrist to show that everything worked perfectly. "They said the nerve damage was too extensive and the bone was too shattered to heal properly." Grax touched his own armor plating instinctively. Corvans could regenerate minor wounds, but major trauma like Morrison was describing would be crippling or fatal. "How long did your recovery take?" 3 weeks in the medical bay, then 2 months of physical therapy," Morrison said casually. "I was back on full duty after that. The thing about humans is, we don't just survive things that should kill us. We come back from them stronger than we were before." The Corvans exchanged glances that Morrison's translator couldn't interpret, but he could tell they were impressed. Captain Thorne had seen this reaction before when other species learned about human durability. It usually started with disbelief, moved through amazement, and often ended with either deep respect or serious concern. "Your species fascinates us," Grax admitted. "We thought we understood what it meant to be warriors. But you humans seem to treat survival as a basic skill rather than an achievement." Back in the laboratory, Dr. Kelleth had made another disturbing discovery. She was reviewing military records from human conflicts, and the survival statistics were beyond anything she had ever seen. Humans regularly survived in situations where entire armies of other species would be wiped out completely. During something called the Battle of Titan Ridge, a human unit had been cut off behind enemy lines for 6 months. By the time rescue arrived, they had not only survived but had somehow turned their desperate situation into a strategic advantage and begun winning territory back from their enemies. "Pip, look at this," Dr. Kelleth called to her assistant. These humans were outnumbered 20 to 1, had no supply lines, and were fighting in an environment that should have killed them within days. Not only did they survive, they actually became more effective fighters as the situation got worse. Pip studied the data with growing amazement. It's as if hardship makes them stronger rather than weaker. This contradicts everything we know about stress and survival. Dr. Kelleth nodded grimly. I'm beginning to think that what we're seeing isn't just biological adaptation. It's a fundamental difference in how humans relate to adversity itself. Where other species are broken down by trauma and hardship, humans seem to be built up by it. The implications were staggering and somewhat frightening. If humans truly became stronger through suffering, what did that mean for galactic peace and stability? Word about the impossible human had reached the highest levels of the Galactic Council by the end of the week. Fleet Admiral Kes Valderan arrived at Nexus 7 aboard her massive flagship with an escort of 12 warships. The Admiral was a Zerothian, a species that looked like walking mountains made of dark stone and metal. She stood 3 meters tall and her voice could shake walls when she was angry. Admiral Valderan had fought in more wars than most species had even heard of. She understood military power better than anyone in the galaxy, and the reports about human durability had made her very concerned. If humans could really survive the kind of damage the reports claimed, it would change everything about how wars were fought and won. The Admiral called for an immediate meeting with all the senior researchers and the human delegation. The main conference room was packed with beings from dozens of different species, all wanting to hear what the most powerful military leader in known space had to say about the human situation. Dr. Kelleth, Admiral Valderan began in her voice that sounded like distant thunder. Your reports about human survival capabilities have reached the Defense Committee. They want concrete proof of these claims, not just scanner readings and medical theories. Dr. Kelleth stood up nervously. Even though she was a respected scientist, being questioned by Admiral Valderan was intimidating. Admiral, the evidence is quite clear from our scans and research. Humans demonstrate survival rates that are mathematically impossible by our current understanding of biology. Understanding and proof are different things, the Admiral replied. The Council needs to know exactly what we're dealing with when it comes to human military capabilities. Scanner readings can be wrong or misinterpreted. We need controlled testing. Captain Thorne immediately stood up. Admiral, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, I have to object. You want to deliberately injure one of my officers just to satisfy scientific curiosity. Admiral Valderan's stone-like face didn't change expression. Captain, every species that joins the Galactic Council must undergo standardized testing of their defensive capabilities. This is required by the Military Readiness Protocol. If humans claim to have unusual survival abilities, those claims must be verified. The room fell silent as everyone realized what the Admiral was proposing. She wanted to conduct controlled experiments on a human to see how much damage they could survive. It sounded cruel, but it was actually standard procedure for new species joining the galactic community. Jake Morrison had been sitting quietly in the back of the room, but now he stood up. Admiral, I volunteer for whatever testing you think is necessary. Captain Thorne turned to look at Morrison with surprise. Jake, you don't have to do this. We can refuse the testing and deal with whatever diplomatic consequences arise. Morrison shook his head. Captain, these people need to understand what they're dealing with. Besides, I'm curious myself about what those scanners really detected. Maybe this will give us all some answers. Dr. Kelleth felt a mixture of excitement and worry about the proposed testing. As a scientist, she was eager to learn more about human biology. As a medical professional, she was concerned about deliberately causing harm to a patient. Admiral, what kind of testing are you proposing? Standard survivability assessment, Admiral Valderan replied. Controlled exposure to various forms of trauma under full medical supervision. We start small and increase intensity until we find the subject's breaking point. The testing began the next day in a specially prepared medical facility. Morrison lay on an examination table surrounded by the most advanced medical equipment on the station. Dr. Kelleth monitored his vital signs while other researchers prepared different types of controlled trauma to test his limits. They started with exposure to toxins that would paralyze most species within minutes. Morrison's body processed the poison like it was nothing more than bad food. His immune system not only fought off the toxin, but seemed to develop resistance to it in real time. Next came controlled electrical shock at levels that would stop the hearts of most galactic species. Morrison's nervous system absorbed the electricity, and his heart rate actually became more stable rather than less. The monitoring equipment showed his body adapting to the electrical current and learning to channel it harmlessly. Physical trauma testing came next. Small cuts, minor burns, and controlled impacts that would cause significant injury to other beings. Each time, Morrison's body responded not just by healing, but by developing better defenses against future similar damage. "This is remarkable," Dr. Kelleth said as she watched Morrison's cellular regeneration rate increase with each test. "His body isn't just surviving the trauma, it's using each exposure to become more resistant to future damage." The most surprising discovery came when they exposed Morrison to a synthetic virus designed to attack nervous system function. Most species would be paralyzed or killed by such a pathogen. Morrison's immune system not only fought off the virus but developed antibodies that could potentially protect other humans from similar biological weapons. "He's not just healing," Dr. Quantum observed as he studied the data. "He's evolving in real time. Each challenge makes him stronger and more capable of surviving future challenges." Admiral Valdoran watched the testing with growing amazement. In her centuries of military experience, she had never seen anything like what Morrison was demonstrating. "Doctor, are you saying this human is actually becoming harder to kill as we try to hurt him?" "That's exactly what the data shows," Dr. Kelleth confirmed. "Every test we run makes him more resistant to that type of damage. It's as if his body treats trauma as a training exercise rather than an injury." By the end of the testing, Morrison had been exposed to 17 different types of potentially fatal trauma. Not only had he survived everything they could safely test, but his body had adapted to become resistant to all of it. The medical scanners now showed him as even more durable than when they started. Morrison sat up on the examination table and stretched. "Is that it? I was expecting this to be more challenging." The room full of alien researchers stared at him in stunned silence. They had just witnessed a being become systematically more difficult to kill through the process of being attacked. It was like watching evolution happen in fast forward. Admiral Valdoran spoke in a voice filled with respect and concern. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison, you have just demonstrated capabilities that will require us to completely revise our understanding of military power in this galaxy." Morrison looked confused. "Ma'am, I'm just one soldier. There are millions of humans serving in our military, and most of them have been through experiences that would make today's testing look like a warm-up exercise." The Admiral's stone face actually showed expression for the first time since she had arrived. It was a mixture of awe and worry that made everyone in the room understand that the galaxy was about to change in ways they couldn't imagine. The test results from Jake Morrison sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council within hours of their completion. Admiral Valdoran transmitted her findings directly to the Defense Committee on the capital world of Zentara Prime. Military leaders from every major species held emergency meetings to discuss what the human testing had revealed. Dr. Zara Kelleth found herself preparing the most important scientific report of her career. The implications of Morrison's demonstrated abilities would reshape how the galaxy viewed human civilization and military power. She had spent her entire life studying biology and evolution, but nothing had prepared her for what she had witnessed in the testing facility. The formal presentation took place in the Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus 7. Representatives from 40 different species packed the massive chamber to hear the official findings. Holographic displays showed Morrison's test data alongside comparison charts from every known galactic species. Admiral Valdoran stood at the center of the hall, addressing the assembled delegates. Her massive stone form commanded attention as her voice carried clearly to every corner of the room. "Honored representatives, what we have discovered about human biology requires immediate revision of our military threat assessments and diplomatic protocols." She activated the main display showing footage from Morrison's testing. The assembled aliens watched in silence as the humans survived trauma that would have killed any of their own species instantly. More disturbing was the clear evidence that each test made him stronger rather than weaker. The human capacity for survival and adaptation represents a complete paradigm shift in our understanding of biological warfare. Admiral Valdoran continued. "Any species capable of producing individuals like Lieutenant Commander Morrison must be considered a major military power regardless of their technology or fleet size." Commander Vex Quantum stood up to address the assembly. His crystalline form caught the light as he spoke in his wind chime voice. "The mathematical implications are staggering. If even 1% of the human population possesses Morrison's level of durability, they would represent the most formidable ground force in galactic history. Dr. Kelleth was called forward to present her medical findings. She felt nervous speaking to such an important gathering, but the scientific evidence was too important to keep private. Honored delegates, our research indicates that Lieutenant Commander Morrison is not unique among humans. His abilities appear to be normal for their species, particularly among their military personnel. Gasps and concerned murmurs rippled through the assembly. The idea that Morrison represented typical human durability, rather than an exceptional case, changed everything about how they viewed humanity's place in galactic civilization. Captain Rex Thorne was invited to speak on behalf of the human delegation. He stood up slowly and looked around at all the alien faces staring at him with mixtures of respect, fear, and curiosity. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand your concern about human military capabilities. But I want you to know that we come in peace and friendship. A delegate from the warlike Draknor Empire stood up aggressively. Captain Thorne, how do we know humans won't use their apparent invulnerability to conquer other species? Your people could potentially wage wars that no one else could survive. Thorne considered his answer carefully. Sir, humans have been fighting wars among ourselves for thousands of years. We learned long ago that true strength comes from protecting others, not conquering them. That's why we joined the Galactic Council in the first place. Morrison himself had been sitting quietly in the back, but now he walked forward to join Captain Thorne. The entire assembly turned to look at the human who had become the center of so much attention and concern. If I may address the assembly, Morrison said in his calm voice. The translator carried his words to every being in the hall. I understand that my test results have caused worry about human intentions, but I want you to know something important about my people. He rolled up his sleeve to show the scars that had started this entire situation. Every mark on my body came from protecting others. Fellow soldiers, civilians, even aliens I had never met before. We don't survive impossible things because we're trying to be scary. We survive them because someone needs us to keep going. Morrison's words seemed to resonate with many of the delegates. Dr. Kelleth found herself thinking about all the human medical records she had reviewed. Most of the injuries had indeed occurred during rescue operations, defensive actions, or humanitarian missions. Admiral Valdoran nodded approvingly. Lieutenant Commander Morrison speaks the truth. Our intelligence indicates that humans consistently use their abilities to protect, rather than conquer. This makes them valuable potential allies rather than threats. The Corvan mercenary leader Grax stood up from the observer section. Admiral, my people have fought alongside humans in 3 separate conflicts. They are indeed formidable warriors, but they fight with honor and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Over the following days, news of the human durability findings spread throughout galactic civilization. Military academies began studying human tactics and survival techniques. Medical schools requested access to human biological data. Diplomatic corps started treating human delegations with newfound respect and caution. But perhaps the most significant change was in how other species viewed their own limitations. If humans could survive and adapt to trauma that seemed impossible, what other assumptions about biological limits were wrong? Research programs began investigating whether other species might have hidden potentials waiting to be discovered. Morrison found himself in the unusual position of being famous throughout the galaxy. Requests for interviews, speaking engagements, and military consultations flooded in from dozens of worlds. He handled the attention with the same calm confidence he had shown during his testing. It's strange being called impossible to kill, Morrison told Dr. Kelleth during their final interview. Back home, I'm just another soldier who's been through some tough times. The idea that my scars make me some kind of galactic phenomenon still feels surreal. Dr. Kelleth had come to understand something profound about humanity through her research. Lieutenant Commander, your scars represent far more than individual toughness. They demonstrate your species' fundamental relationship with adversity. Where other beings are diminished by trauma, humans are defined by how they overcome it. As the human delegation prepared to leave Nexus 7, bioscanners throughout the galaxy were being reprogrammed with new baseline parameters for human physiology. The classification, impossible to kill, was replaced with a more accurate assessment, human standard resilience parameters. Because in the end, what made Morrison remarkable wasn't that he was uniquely tough for a human. It was that being essentially impossible to kill was simply what humans considered normal. The scars that had triggered galaxy-wide amazement were just visible proof of humanity's greatest strength. They didn't just survive the impossible, They made it look routine,